L. Josephine Baker was an African-American civil rights activist that created a big impact on the civil rights movement in the 90s by working with the most important organizations in that time and supporting her ideology with the beliefs and desires of an equal, free, and strong nation. But who was Ella Baker? What was her life before she became an activist and important figure of the civil rights movement? What were her reasons to get involved in the big movement? Well, we will have to start with the basics. Now, Ella Baker was born on December 13 of 1903 at Norfolk, Virginia. Her true home was actually in rural Littleton, North Carolina, in which her grandparents had land they used to work as slaves. Her mother was Regina Rose Baker, an active member in the community service of the Baptist Church, and her father was Blake Baker. He was a man that used to spend most of his time working in the hard labor of the railroad, and that was rarely seen by Ella or his family in the house. She was the middle of 3 siblings: Margaret Odessa Baker, Prince Baker, and Blake Curtis Baker. She graduated in 1927 from Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina, challenging lots of the stereotypes of women having education and, of course, racial difficulties. She did not wait a lot of time to decide to move from North Carolina to New York and start her life as an activist and strong supporter of the civil rights movement. Ella Baker began her involvement as part of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, first working as a field secretary and then working as director of branches in 1943. She achieved some things while being part of this organization, like expanding the membership up to 1,500 people and increasing the amount of money in Virginia's NAACP. Still, Baker was not always recognized by her efforts, especially by her male teammates. Again, Ella Baker was a woman that was breaking somehow a lot of rules and restrictions that women had back then. She was a strong figure of woman power due to the circumstances. In 1957, she moved to Atlanta to help with the new organization of Martin Luther King, which was called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She was put in charge of founding the Atlanta office due to her experience in the NAACP by organizing a voter registration campaign called Crusade for Citizenship. While she worked in this organization, she experienced by first-hand the coordinating skills of Martin Luther King, and she found it somewhat annoying the way Martin Luther King was too controlling. This was due, again, to the fact that she was a woman and her opinion, the same as her ideas or disagreements, were not something the leader King was used to experience. While Ella Baker was working at the CLC, she decided to take part of one more significant movement. After the incident in Greensboro, in which a restaurant refused to lend any type of service to black students, the idea of a new movement was born. Young African Americans came together in order to try to make a difference to avoid that kind of segregation. They asked for King's help as a way to find a solution that did not involve violence and any more harm towards them or others. Baker found out about it and decided to support the vision of the young members of the community by holding, with the help of Martin Luther King, the first meeting of the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee at Shaw University in the Eastern weekend of 1960. She promoted this organization as a nonviolent movement that will sooner help influence the civil rights movements during marches and will help create the Freedom Summer in 1964. But what motivated her from the start? Now, Baker's mother had an special ideology. Since she was an activist member of the Baptist Church, she strongly supported the idea that they should always help those less fortunate. Baker grew up with that idea. Helping and supporting each other was something she considered normal. That is one of the reasons why she was able to open with people easily, because she took that unique ideology that her mother showed her since she was a child. Of course, this big female figure was not only influenced by the idea of helping others. What actually motivated her from the start to fight for the civil rights of African Americans to become an activist and challenge all the rules were her grandparents' backstory. Baker's grandparents were slaves for many years. She was told by her grandmother, from which she was really close to, of the difficulties and harsh moments they had to face while serving to their masters and being used as tools. Her grandmother explained her about the war on Conti, a forest full of agricultural development of tobacco, cotton, and corn that relied from slave labor, and how they were forced to work, at least by their own experience in North Carolina, from the sunset to sunrise, 6 days every week. Breaks weren't given at all, and slaves could only rest until their bodies couldn't give it more, just until they died. Death was the only way to escape from that unjust system that forced African Americans to be tools instead of people. Ella was influenced with the old view from African Americans, long time before she was even born. She then realized the fact that all these experiences led the community to gather together, to help and support each other, but overall, Baker saw how it made people stronger and with more courage to face diversities. That was the actual start of her journey. There are some reasons why Ella Baker is not really known in our history books or the civil rights movement, not as other historical figures like Martin Luther King. And this is because when she started her career, she wasn't focused on gaining attention or publicity. She didn't thought the way to make a difference was by gaining a lot of attention, neither leaders. That is why she somehow can be considered a hero in the shadows from the civil rights movements. Her importance revolves around the fact that she was a powerful woman in the years where women were barely considered human beings with some ability to think, but only in cooking and being mothers. She made an impact in the several organizations that supported the civil rights movement, ignoring the stereotypes and gender difficulties that she had to break. She got into a point where she was considered an equal to Martin Luther King, but not that he recognized her or something like that. She was recognized by the people that worked with her and that got to know her. Probably back then, the idea of an African American woman becoming an activist might have seemed ridiculous to the majority of people. But L. Josephine Baker faced that judgment, and she succeeded on proving her ideologies of strong and free people.